I want you to just look at your phone for a second, or your laptop.
Okay.
You have these incredibly powerful AI models right there available to you now. You
Right.
can chat with them, ask them to, I don't know, write the sonnet about a toaster, debug some Python code, whatever.
Right.
But then you look at your actual life, your data. Your emails are in one silo. Your WhatsApp messages are in a totally different one. Your calendar is locked in a third.
It's the great paradox of modern AI, isn't it?
What?
We have this godlike intelligence,
Yeah.
but it's trapped in a padded room.
Yes.
It can think, it can reason, but it can't act.
Right. It's like having a genius personal assistant, a Nobel Prize winner, but you've locked them in the basement and they can only slide a handwritten note under the door.
Huh.
They can't actually go pick up your dry cleaning. They can't book that flight. They can just tell you how they would do it if they had legs.
Which brings us to the core theme for today. Agency. Real, tangible agency.
Today on the deep dive, we are not just analyzing a trend. We are practically handing you the keys to the castle. We are tearing down that basement door.
We're talking about OpenClaw.
We're talking about OpenClaw.
And to be clear, this isn't just another app review. I mean, if you treat this like just installing another chatbot, you're missing the entire point. This is an architectural shift.
Okay.
We're looking at the master guide to personal agentic orchestration. It's a mouthful, I know.
It is a mouthful.
But the concept is simple. It's about restoring you as the sovereign orchestrator of your own digital life.
I love that phrase, sovereign orchestrator. It sounds so commanding. And it implies that right now we aren't sovereign at all.
We're not. We're just tenants in someone else's cloud.
So the mission for today is a bit different. This is a tutorial. We are going to walk you through building this system, a local first control plane from the ground up.
We'll break it down into 3 acts. First, the nervous system, just understanding the architecture. Second, environmental hardening, which is basically how to install this thing so it doesn't break when you look at it wrong.
Right.
And third, the configuration, making it smart and crucially keeping it secure.
Let's start with the anatomy then. The research papers describing OpenClaw use this biological metaphor that I found really helpful. They distinguish between the nervous system and the brain.
Yes.
Why the separation? Why not just call it the bot?
It's probably the most critical concept to grasp right at the start. In most commercial chatbots, think ChatGPT or Gemini, the brain and the mouth are effectively the same thing.
All in one place.
All in one place, living on a massive server farm in a data center.
Mm-hmm.
You type, it goes to the cloud, they type back.
Yeah.
It's a monolith.
But with OpenClaw, you're cutting that cord.
Partially. Or rather, you're decoupling the control.
Mm.
The nervous system is the gateway.
Okay.
This is a local WebSocket server that runs on your own hardware. By default, it's sitting right there on your machine at 127.0.1, port 18789.
Okay, for those of us who aren't network engineers, paint the picture. What is this gateway actually doing if it's not doing the thinking?
Think of the gateway as the spinal cord and the sensory organs. It handles the ears and mouth.
So communication.
All communication. It manages the state of your conversations. It routes messages from WhatsApp to Telegram. It handles media processing and even little things like typing indicators.
So when I see those 3 little dots bobbing up and down in a chat, that's the gateway.
That's the gateway. And here is why that matters.
Yeah.
Because it's running locally on your machine, it has 0 latency. It's not pulsing a cloud server 500 miles away just to tell you it's typing.
It makes the whole interaction feel instant, snappy.
Exactly. It holds the state of your world locally.
And then the brain, the thing that actually understands what I'm saying, that sits somewhere else?
Correct. That's the PyAgent runtime. It operates in what's called RPC, mode remote procedure call.
RPC. Break that down for me.
It's just, computer speak for asking another program to do something. The gateway says, hey, I heard a message come in from Slack, and it sends that data over to the runtime.
Okay.
The runtime is where the heavy lifting happens, the reasoning, the tool selection, all the logic.
It's a separation of concerns. The body is here, but the mind, well, the mind can be anywhere, effectively.
Precisely. And this architecture is what solves that app silo problem we started with. They call it multi-channel convergence.
Which is a fancy way of saying one inbox to rule them all.
Pretty much. Instead of you frantically alt-tabbing between WhatsApp, Telegram, Slack, and Signal to see where your team is messaging you.
Which is my life.
The gateway uses these really robust underlying libraries to hook into all of them. It unifies them into a single execution thread.
That is a dream for notification fatigue. But I noticed something in the docs about device-agnostic execution. It sounds like the agent can reach out and touch the physical world, too.
This is where it gets really sci-fi. The architecture distinguishes between exec tools, which run on the main machine hosting the gateway, and device local actions.
Give me a concrete example of that.
Okay, so let's say your gateway is running on your powerful desktop at home. That's the mothership.
Got it.
But you're out for a walk with your phone. You can install a node on your phone. That node advertises its capabilities like camera.snap or location.get back to the mothership.
So the brain at home can tell the hand in my pocket to take a picture.
Yes. You could literally ask your agent, where am I and what am I looking at? The agent running on your desktop triggers the location.get and camera.snap tools on your phone, processes the data, and answers you.
It bridges the physical gap. That's amazing.
It really is.
Okay, so we have the body, the gateway. Now we need to give it a high-quality brain. If I'm setting this up for production, meaning I actually want to run my life with this, not just play around, what's a recommended stack? There are 1,000 models out there.
The documentation is very opinionated here, and for good reason. For a production-ready orchestration, they strongly recommend the Anthropic ProMax subscription coupled with Claude Opus 4.5.
4.5. Why that specific model? Why not just use a cheaper, faster model, like a basic GPT-4o or a local Llama model?
Two big reasons: context and resistance.
Okay.
You are giving this agent system-level access. You're letting it run code, manage your calendar, maybe even access your bank details via a browser. You need a model that is incredibly hard to jailbreak or trick.
Right, you don't want it to hallucinate a command that deletes your hard drive just because someone sent you a prank text.
Exactly that. And you needed to remember instructions you gave it 3 weeks ago. Opus 4.5 has that long context stability.
I see.
But even with a smart model, sometimes you need it to pause and reflect. And that's where thinking modes come in.
I saw this in the command list. It feels very human. Like, let me think about that.
It's essentially forcing the model to show its work. When you invoke think or configure it to run automatically for complex tasks, you're engaging GPT 5.2 or specialized codex models to perform chain-of-thought reasoning before taking action.
So it's the measure twice, cut once philosophy.
It mitigates what's called shallow parsing. If you tell an automated agent, refactor this code and deploy it, a basic model might just try to run a deploy command immediately.
And break everything.
A thinking model will map out the dependencies, check the build process, anticipate errors, and then execute.
Okay, I'm sold on the architecture. I want to build this, but the guide warns that a local first assistant is only as resilient as the machine it runs on. They call this environmental hardening.
It sounds like prepping a bunker, doesn't it? And in a way, you are.
You're building infrastructure?
You're building infrastructure. If this crashes, your personal assistant dies.
So what are the non-negotiables? I have a laptop. What do I need?
First, the engine. You absolutely must be running Node.js version 22 or higher.
That's very specific. Why 22? Usually software supports older versions?
WebSocket stability. Older versions of Node can be flaky with long-running connections. And remember, the gateway is a WebSocket server. If that drops, your nervous system shuts down.
Ah.
You need the daemon persistence that comes with the newer builds.
Got it. And operating system. I assume this is a Linux game.
Natively, yes.
Yeah.
macOS and Linux are the happy paths, but, and this is critical for our Windows listeners, do not try to run this in raw PowerShell.
Oh, really?
You will have a bad time. The file system calls and signal handling are just different enough to cause all sorts of headaches.
So what's the solution?
The guide strongly recommends WSL2, the Windows subsystem for Linux. Keep it in a Unix-like environment.
Okay, so I've got my Node 22. I'm in my terminal. How do I actually install it?
You can use npm, but the preferred manager is pnpm. It handles the dependency trees much, much cleaner, especially if you're building from source.
Walk me through the flow. I'm staring at a blinking cursor. What's next?
Step 1, global deployment to get the CLI. But the real magic happens with one specific command.
Okay.
OpenClaw, onboard, install daemon.
The magic command. What is it doing under the hood?
It automates all the messy stuff. It initializes the gateway daemon, so it sets it up as a proper user service. On a Mac that's launched on Linux, it's systemed.
And this ensures that if my computer restarts, my brain doesn't stay dead. It launches on boot.
That's crucial. You don't want to have to manually restart your brain every morning.
No, I do not.
And it also sets up your workspace and installs the default skills. Once that's done, you manage the lifecycle with the update utility. You can toggle between stable, beta, or if you're feeling brave, dev,
I think I'll stick to stable for now. I need my nervous system to be predictable, so it's installed, it's running. Now we need to give it personality. This happens in the JSON config file, right?
That's right. OpenClaw.json. This is where raw software becomes your assistant. You can tweak everything here, but the coolest configuration is the thinking level matrix.
We mentioned think earlier, but this allows you to set the default behavior.
Right. You can set a thinking level that ranges from off or minimal all the way up to high or X high.
Give me a use case. When would I ever want minimal?
Latency critical tasks. If you just want to ping the bot and say, is the server up or what's on my calendar, you don't need a philosophical treatise.
You just want speed.
You want speed. You set it to minimal.
And high.
High stakes logic. Let's say you ask it to research 3 different vacation spots, cross-reference with my budget in this spreadsheet, and check flight availability.
That's a lot of steps.
It requires multi-step reasoning. You want the model to spend the extra tokens to think through every single step.
Now, connecting the channels, I use WhatsApp, Slack, and iMessage. Do I just dump my passwords into this JSON file? Because that sounds terrifying.
I know, definitely not. OpenClaw uses a bridging system. For WhatsApp, it uses the Bailey's library. You run OpenClaw channels login, and it generates a QR code right there in your terminal.
Oh, slick. Like logging into WhatsApp web?
Exactly the same process. You scan it with your phone, and you're in.
And Telegram and Slack.
For Telegram, you use a bot token. For Slack, it's a bit more involved. You need a Slack bot token, and you have to enable something called socket mode. But the end result is the same. All these disparate protocols get funneled into that one gateway.
What about iMessage?
That's a native integration, but you have to be on macOS. It hooks directly into the Messages app database.
Okay, we need to pause here and address the elephant in the room.
The security question.
The security question. If I have this thing connected to my public messaging apps, and it has system access to my computer, isn't that a security nightmare? Can't anyone just DM me and hack my life?
It's the first question everyone asks, and it should be. OpenClaw operates on a philosophy they call security at the door.
What does the door look like?
It means every single inbound direct message is treated as an untrusted injection attempt. By default, the system is in pairing mode.
Like pairing a Bluetooth speaker.
It's a similar concept. If a random person or a bot messages you on Telegram, the gateway completely ignores the content of the message. It doesn't process it at all. It just replies with a unique pairing code.
So the payload never even hits the runtime?
Never. Nothing happens until you, the owner, go to your terminal and run OpenClaw pairing approve. Until you do that, they are knocking on a steel door.
Okay, that handles strangers, but what about me? Or a group chat I'm in. If my agent is in a group chat with my friends, I don't want my friends to be able to trigger a delete command on my server.
Of course not. This is where sandboxing comes in, the sandbox permission matrix. The recommendation is to set agents.defaults.sandbox.mode to non-main.
Non-main, so that implies everyone who isn't me.
Correct. Any session that isn't the owner runs inside an isolated Docker container. And inside that container, there is a very strict denialist.
So I can give them toys, but take away the sharp objects.
You can allow tools like read or write text, but you deny browser, canvas, nodes, and gateway. Your friends can chat with the bot, but they can't access your webcam or reconfigure your nervous system.
And for me, the owner, do I have limits?
You hold the keys, but even for you, there's a safety latch. It's the elevated command.
Ah, like sudo in Linux.
Exactly like sudo. You can toggle elevated on to grant yourself temporary administrative capability like root access, but you turn it off when you're done.
So you don't accidentally nuke your own setup.
Precisely. It prevents accidents during a casual conversation.
Okay, we're secure. We're installed. Now let's get to the fun part. What can this thing actually do? How does the automation work?
It works by translating your natural language into a directed acyclic graph of tool calls.
Whoa, directed acyclic graph. That sounds like a math exam. Simplify that.
It just means it plans a path, a flow chart.
Okay.
First I do A, then B, then C, and I can't go backwards. So let's look at browser automation. OpenClaw manages a dedicated Chromium instance via the Chrome DevTools protocol, or CDP.
So it's not just scraping text from a page.
No, it is driving the browser. Browser.goto, browser.click, browser.screenshot. But the killer feature here is A2UI, the live canvas.
A2UI, application to user interface.
Think of it as on-demand app generation. Instead of the agent just pasting a wall of text saying, here are your flight options, the agent can actually render a visual workspace.
What do you mean render?
It can display the flight seat map as an interactive UI element right there in your chat window.
That's huge. It bridges the gap between a command line and a GUI.
It absolutely does.
Uh-huh.
And then you have mixture of agents, or MOA. This is moving beyond the idea of the monolithic agent.
Why do we need a mixture? Isn't one genius brain enough?
Context fatigue. If you have one agent trying to write a novel, check your emails, and debug code all in one session, it gets confused. The context window gets really messy.
I see.
MOA solves this by layering intelligence like a corporate hierarchy.
So instead of one frantic freelancer, I have a whole department.
Precisely. You have layer one, specialized proposers. Maybe one is a writer, another is an illustrator. They work in isolated sessions. Then their outputs are sent to layer two, the aggregator or the editor.
And the editor synthesizes the final product.
Yes. And OpenClaw has specific flow control tools for this. Session send allows agents to dispatch messages to each other. And crucially, there's a flag called replay skip.
What does that do?
It keeps the internal chatter invisible to you. If the editor asks the writer for a draft, you don't want to see the writer say, "Here is the draft," in your main chat.
Right.
Replay skip keeps that back and forth in the background. You only see the final polished result.
That is sophisticated. It really feels like we've graduated from chatbots.
We've gone from the architecture, the nervous system, to the bunker installation, the security protocols, and finally this layered visual automation.
And the so what here feels pretty big. We aren't just installing a productivity tool.
No, you are installing a private, secure, and capable operating system for your life. It runs locally on your hardware, but it connects globally. It restores your sovereignty over your own data.
It changes the dynamic. You stop being a user of an app and you become the architect of your own intelligence.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
Think about that final provocative thought we discussed before the show.
Yeah. We have these gateways. My gateway is my nervous system. Your gateway is yours. What happens when we start connecting them?
That's the frontier. If my local gateway starts talking securely to your local gateway, bypassing the central cloud servers entirely, are we building a new decentralized internet of agents?
A decentralized web of personal agents. No big tech in the middle, just my AI talking to your AI. That is something to chew on.
It certainly is.
If you're ready to take back control, the command is simple. OpenClaw onboard. Start the journey. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you in the terminal.